Hi. I know you're all really nervous about taking notes in my class, especially for the reading assignments that you have at night. So I wanted to take a little bit of time to go over a couple tips of how to organize your notes, which is probably the easiest part, but most importantly, how to come up with what the important information is, how to discern what is important after you read a text. Now, this process will take a while, especially when you're first starting. But after you practice more and more, it'll get faster. So, like everything else, the more you practice, the better you'll get. And this is a skill that will be useful not only in high school from your freshman year on, but once you get to college, or if you don't go to college, if you go to a job where you have to learn something, learning how to take information, even from spoken lecture or from directions, and analyzing it, putting it into your own words, well, that will help you remember it later. So this is a really important skill. Now, I know I'm having you guys use a combined system of note-taking called that combines Cornell-style notes with outline-style notes. So here is an example of my notebook. Ooh, that's messy. So you can see here, we're putting cues in this column, and the date is always going to be up. Well, I didn't do it correctly here, but here's the title, and here are the notes. So on every page, you should continue on with that. Cues on this side, body of information here. And what the cues are meant to do is to tell you what's in this big block of blah, because there's so much information here that you don't necessarily need to know all of it at every moment. So if you are doing a timed quiz that you're allowed to use your notes, for example, and you have a question on the characteristics of civilization, you can look at your cues. That would probably be a cue, or civilization would be, and you'd be able to look at the information, find it exactly where you need on your page. So remember, cues here. And you can do that after you take these notes. In fact, I would recommend it because you have time to process it. So this part you do as you go through your notes. And I know this is the hardest part you have so far. So with that, let's take a look at the text that I'm having the honors kids read for this weekend that starts with the culture of Egypt. So take a look at that page that'll come up on your screen. So here's the notes I have. It says the culture of Egypt. Egypt had incredibly advanced culture. Remember, you don't have to write in complete sentences. As long as you know what it's saying, then you're fine. Technical knowledge, pyramids. For me, that says technical knowledge is shown in the pyramids. Culture, divine, important to daily life. And again, if you don't know what divine is, you need to use the different word, which is God. So God is important to daily life in Egyptian society. Then I have under number 2, spiritual life in Egyptian society. Now, let's go on to the next thing. And I'm just going to read it. I hope you can have it up on your computer or whatever else you're using to listen to this, but if you can read it at the same time with me, that would be excellent. So, spiritual life in Egyptian society. The Egyptians had no word for religion because it was an inseparable element of the entire world order to which Egyptian society belonged. Inseparable. What does that mean? Can you separate it? No. So, the Egyptians were polytheistic and had a remarkable number of gods associated with heavenly bodies and natural forces. So, did the Egyptians have one god, or did they have many gods? Two groups, sun gods and land gods, came to have special prominence, hardly unusual in view of the importance to Egypt's well-being of the sun, the river, and the fertile land along its banks. The sun was the source of life and hence worthy of worship. The sun god took on different forms and names depending on his specific role. He was worshipped as Atum in human form and also as Re, who had a human body but the head of a falcon. The pharaoh took the title Son of Re, since he was regarded as the earthly form of Re. Eventually, Re became associated with Amon, the air god of thieves, as Amon-Re. Now, this paragraph gets into some detail pretty quickly. Now, they're talking about spiritual life in Egyptian society. What do you think the paragraph's going to be about? Spiritual life. Religion. So, the religion, they already introduced this in the transition sentence, which is the sentence before that little title header, that said that the cosmic order, presence of the divine. So you know that it's going into a discussion of the divine. Now, break it down even more. They're going to talk about gods. Did they have one god? Many gods. Many gods. So then, once you say they had many gods, you can go into the examples of the gods. And they talked about a couple different kinds. 2 groups, sun gods, land gods. One example of a sun god was Re in the human form, and let's see, Atum. Oh, Atum is the human form, and Re is the non-human form. And then the pharaoh is the son of the sun god, which is lovely because there's 2 suns in English there. So they're talking about that. Then they're talking about the sun gods there, so what do you think they're going to talk about next in the next paragraph? Well, let's look at the next paragraph. River and land deities included Osiris and Isis with their child Horus, who is related to the Nile and to the sun as well. Osiris became especially important as a symbol of resurrection or rebirth. A famous Egyptian myth told of the struggle between Osiris, who brought civilization to Egypt, and his evil brother Seth, who killed him, cut his body into 14 parts, and tossed them into the Nile River. Okay, let's stop there, because it's getting good. What is this one talking about? River and land gods, which were the other kind of gods. So the first paragraph introduces the idea that they're talking about many gods, then we go into the other, and then sun gods, and then the next paragraph introduces river and land gods. So if you're going to organize this, you don't need that much detail, because I'm never going to ask you, what was this god the god of? Is that important to understanding Egyptian society? Maybe, if you're going into a lot of detail and you're going into something that talks about these gods, but for our purposes, what's the main idea? Did they have one god? Did they have many gods? They had many gods, and it was important to their life. So, what is another thing you should note about these gods? Well, they were dealing with nature. So, sun, land, river, were these things important to the Egyptians? Yes, they were important. So we need to talk about how religion helped people make sense of their lives and how it basically dealt with 90% of the people's lives in Egypt, because about, I think, 90% of the people in Egypt farmed. So sun, important to growing crops, river, important to getting water to grow the crops, and land, you need to grow the crops. It's all about crops. So there we go. Moving on in that middle of the paragraph, after talking about Seth cutting body into 14 parts and tossing it to the Nile River, Osiris' faithful wife, Isis, found the pieces and with the help from other gods restored Osiris to life as a symbol of resurrection and as the judge of the dead. Osiris took on an important role for the Egyptians. By identifying with Osiris, one could hope to gain new life just as Osiris had done. The dead, embalmed and mummified, were placed in tombs, in the case of the kings and pyramids, given the name of Osiris, and by a process of magical identification became Osiris. Like Osiris, they could then be reborn. The flood of the Nile and the new life it brought to Egypt were symbolized by Isis gathering all of Osiris's parts together and were celebrated each spring in the festival of the new land. So this is talking about a myth, right? A myth of how people made sense of religion and how people used religion to understand something fundamental to human life, which is death. So we're talking here about death and how people made sense of that, and also how that became a part of their everyday life. So gods were important because they talked about everyday life and they helped people make sense of the life after they died. So that's the two main points there. What would I say for this whole section? Well, gods were important to the Egyptians. They had many gods. Gods generally focused on agriculture, such as the sun, land, and rivers, things necessary for agriculture, and helped people to explain death. Those are the key points. Do you think you could put that in 2 sentences or 2 bullet points? I think you can. Now, do you see how we got there? It took a little while, but I think you can get the idea that we're taking apart the paragraph, we're analyzing it for understanding, and it's not just a story. We have to understand why this is important. So, let's move on to the pyramids. And I know this is going to get long, so I'm sorry. This is the last section I will do. So, the pyramids. One of the great achievements of Egyptian civilization, the building of pyramids, occurred in the time of the Old Kingdom. Pyramids were built as a part of a larger complex of buildings dedicated to the dead. In fact, a city of the dead. The area included a large pyramid for the king's burial, smaller pyramids for his family, and mustabas, rectangular structures with flat roofs, as tombs for the pharaoh's noble officials. The tombs were well prepared for their residents, their rooms furnished and stocked with numerous supplies, including chairs, boats, chests, weapons, games, dishes, and a variety of foods. The Egyptians believed that human beings had 2 bodies, a physical one and a spiritual one that they called the Ka. The physical body was properly preserved by mummification, and the tomb was furnished with all the objects of regular life. The Ka could return, surrounded by earthly comforts, and continue its life despite the death of the physical body. So what does this whole start saying? The Egyptians built pyramids, but they built them so that people, specifically rich kings, could live the life that they had already lived in their human life, again in the afterlife. So pyramids were built for kings, their family, and high officials. They put all the earthly comforts that they had in real life into the tomb so that when the spirit came back, they could access it and live a happy life. So they just had a sentence about the physical body. And I want to point this out to you because this is excellent writing. Death of the physical body. What are they going to talk about in the next paragraph? The preservation of the physical body. So keep that in mind. They're using transitions to guide the reader from one paragraph to the other. And then when we look at the first sentence of this next paragraph, we'll see what they're going to talk about next. So, to preserve the physical body after death, the Egyptians practiced mummification, a process of slowly drying a dead body to prevent it from decomposing. What do you think this paragraph is going to be about? Mummification. So, I don't think that the process of mummification is particularly important to understanding Egyptian culture. However, I think it's an interesting interesting to understand that they had advanced medical knowledge. So read through the rest of this paragraph when you have a chance, and you can see they understood a lot about the human body, which is not necessarily true for other people. So what does that say about Egyptian culture? Not only could they build pyramids, but they also had the ability to mummify people, which took a lot of work that it will detail next. Okay? Let's go to the last sentence of that paragraph. At the end of the process, which took about 70 days, a lifelike mask was placed over the head and shoulders of the mummy, which was then sealed in a case and placed in its tomb. Okay, so we're talking about tombs. What were tombs? The pyramids. Next paragraph. Pyramids were tombs for the mummified bodies of the pharaohs. The largest and most magnificent of the pyramids was built under King Khufu. Constructed at Giza around 2540 BCE, this famous Great Pyramid covered 13 acres, measures 756 feet at each end of its base, and stands 481 feet high. See the comparative illustration in Chapter 6, page 165. Its four sides are almost precisely presented to the 4 points of the compass. The interior included a grand gallery to be the burial chamber, which was built of granite, with a lidless sarcophagus for the pharaoh's body. The Great Pyramid still stands as a visible symbol of the power of Egyptian kings and the spiritual conviction that underlay Egyptian society. No pyramid built later ever matched its size or splendor. The pyramid was not only the king's tomb, it was also an important symbol of royal power. It could be seen from miles away, a visible reminder of the glory and might of the ruler who was living God on earth. So, section on pyramids. What are they? They're tombs for kings, rich people. They have all the stuff that a rich person would want to live in the afterlife. They have a preserved dead body. Not only that, but the pyramids themselves were incredibly advanced. Imagine trying to build something almost precisely on the corners of the compass. So they had mathematical knowledge. They knew geography. I mean, this is incredibly advanced. So what are the 4 things you should know? Religion was important. Kings showed power through building pyramids. Pyramids were advanced technologically because they had these mathematical, it was incredibly difficult to build mathematically, and they obviously understood also geometry. And they also had advanced medical knowledge because of the preservation of human bodies. So there we go, 4 things from those paragraphs. If you can break each paragraph down into 1 or 2 important points, through that process of summarization, you will get better at note-taking. Now, if this is difficult for you, please ask me questions in class, because I want you to get better at note-taking, but we don't have a whole lot of time. So I will work on it in class with you on Monday, as well as from now on. But try to practice reading. If you don't understand the sentence, you need to go back and read it again. Stop. Figure out if there's any words in there that are stopping you or preventing you from understanding the meaning of that sentence. Then don't look at the page, but think about what you just said or what you just read. Put it in maybe a sentence of your own. Then when I would write, I'd write the main words that you need to understand what you were just thinking, and then move on to the next step, which is the information underneath. And each paragraph really only needs about 1 or 2 important points, unless it's one of those incredibly dense paragraphs. So try to get it down to the most essential things, which means, in a way, taking a lot of the specific stuff and taking it a step up into the general. And use the topic sentence to guide you, because the topic sentence will tell you what's in the paragraph. Only make sure you're including things that go with that topic sentence and that are important to understanding that topic sentence. If you have any questions, please ask. Thank you.